everybody, and welcome back to Film Filter. My name is Edgar. I'm your host, and this is episode 2 of Film Filter. I hope you are listening to these in chronological order. No, I'm just joking. You don't need to listen to episode 1. It was but an introduction to very generally who I am. Give you a little indication of where I'm coming from and why I'm doing this project named Film Filter, this podcast. But as of now, episode 2, we're going to get really more properly into the thick of things. We're going to discuss about movies. And this episode, I'd like to title it Strange Darling, The Art of Playful Villainy. On Labor Day weekend, at the outset of Labor Day weekend on Friday, I spent most of the day at home, doing a little bit of work, doing a little bit of this and that, and come the evening, I had noticed, it's one of those strange things when you unconsciously take a step back and realize something about yourself or about how your day has gone. And by the time the sun was setting, I had realized that I'd spent most of the day indoors. I had hardly been outside at all. Partially because I've been busy, partially because I was a little bit lazy. And so I figured, look, I don't have any plans tonight. I wasn't really in the mood to bother anyone, to make a last-minute decision to meet up anywhere. So how about I just go see a movie? I hadn't been to the theater in a couple of weeks, or a week or two, give or take. And I kind of felt like it, but I wanted to see something a little bit different, which is when I remembered that a few YouTubers, in whose opinion I trust, had recently, over the past week or so, had discussed a film called Strange Darling. This is a relatively small film. It is written and directed by someone by the name of J.T. Mollner. That's M-O-2-L-N-E-R. This person is not someone whom I had previously heard of. Their filmography is not very extensive. They were mostly known for a Western that they directed in 2016, so 8 years ago. With a few projects interspersed in between. But I had heard of this film called Strange Darling, which co-stars Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner. From a few YouTubers, I would say, if I saw this on the Friday night of Labor Day weekend, truthfully speaking, I would have to say that the first time I heard of the film's existence was maybe a couple of weeks before. At most, it may have even been the week before. And it's funny how sometimes certain projects can sneak up on you as far as your awareness of them and what they might mean on the cinema landscape, what sort of an impact they might have, what kind of an impact they have already had on the people who have seen them, and the discourse about them, the discourse surrounding them. And I find it all the more interesting when it pertains to a movie I've never heard of up until recently. It's one thing for there to be a lot of discourse surrounding, I don't know, Deadpool and Wolverine. But that was a highly anticipated film. That movie was announced more or less 2 years before it came out, if memory serves. More or less 2 years before it came out, there was a lot of hype. They brought back Hugh Jackman to play a famous character. It was the third Deadpool film. Everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people like Ryan Reynolds and a lot of people like Deadpool. So for there to be a discourse and a lot of chatter surrounding Deadpool and Wolverine, that's not so surprising. Justifiable, but not surprising. The discourse surrounding Strange Darling is, in of itself, rather strange. There is not a ton of information about how this film came to be. I know that it was shot 2 years ago in the summer of 2022, and it had its world premiere at a film festival in 2023. And it is only now getting a wide release, if it can be called such, a wide release. I mean, it actually is playing in a few cinemas here in Montreal, so presumably, if it can play on a few screens in a city like Montreal, I'm assuming it can play on a few screens in much larger cities like Toronto, Vancouver, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Austin, Dallas, all those places. And I was fascinated by what I'd heard about Strange Darling, and the reviewers insisted on not spoiling the film. Now, I mean, in film criticism, it's not very de rigueur. It's not very kulturny to just flat out spoil significant plot points in a general review. So I think on a very general, ethical level, they didn't want to spoil the plot, but having seen the movie, I can understand why. Which is why I want to title the episode "The Art of Playful Villainy." It's a very surprising film. I mean, very, very bluntly, as I believe the official synopsis reveals. I mean, this is the story of a woman who is fleeing for her life from someone who is trying to kill her. The woman is played by Willa Fitzgerald, and the gentleman is Kyle Gallner. Kyle Gallner being the person chasing the Willa Fitzgerald character. And that synopsis is not misleading. That is what happens in this film. But there's also a lot else that happens. And I was particularly impressed. It was such a strange experience because, at least in Montreal, Strange Darling, in fact, is playing at a couple of the multiplexes, but they're all outside of the city. So I went into the heart of the city on Friday night at a relatively well-known cinema in downtown Montreal called Cinéma du Parc. It's on Park Avenue, unsurprisingly, but it's in the basement of this very, very old shopping center, a real old school shopping center, the likes of which they don't really make anymore. And it's in the basement of all places. Now, there was a time when Cinéma du Parc was starting to show its age. They've actually since renovated the rooms, and the chairs are actually plush and the sound system is superior. But it is kind of cool to go down in the basement late on a Friday night to see a movie you know almost nothing about, and that is a thriller. There is something thrilling about it. And thrilled I was. It's a strange experience. The only thing I will spoil about the film is the very first thing that appears on screen, which is some text, white text, on a black background, announcing that the film was shot on 35 millimeter. A bit of a curious announcement to make. I'm not sure why JT Molnar decided to include that at the very start of the movie. I did notice there were a few specks, a little bit of imperfections, little pops, white and black pops, every once in a while throughout the movie. Not so much that they were distracting, or not so much that did they add more digitally in post. I'm pretty sure they were natural. They were interspersed. They were infrequent, but they were there. I don't think it was a film projection. I think it was a digital projection. So probably some sort of digital intermediate, as they say, of what had originally been shot on 35 millimeters. Gorgeous looking film. Another little strange bit of information about this movie. Get this. First, number one, I had never heard of JT Mulder. No idea who this guy is. Ends up directing what might be, so far, as of Labor Day weekend 2024, my favorite movie of the year. That's unexpected. The plot develops in an uninspected manner. It stars Willa Fitzgerald, a name... Now, I want to be clear here. I could not recall the name. I could not remember who this person was. The reality is, after I did a little bit of Googling when I got back home on Friday night, is I had seen this actress before. I saw her in the first season of Reacher, but I think that show was so bland and her character was so bland, I completely forgot of her existence. And credit to Fitzgerald, because she is a, to get haughty-taughty on this episode, she is a tour de force. She is incredible in this movie as this, quote, person fleeing for her life, end quote. It doesn't sound like a role that would translate to a tour de force performance. I completely agree. If you are listening to this podcast and you have not been spoiled and you have not seen the film, how in blue blazes can I be praising Willa Fitzgerald so staunchly for a movie that is basically a traditional thriller, or at least seems like a traditional thriller. Trust me on this one. There's a lot going on in this movie, and Willa Fitzgerald demonstrates the sort of depth and range of acting abilities that I think very, very few people can pull off. The Reacher the Reacher show, like I said, did not even remember she was in the darn thing. I know who she is now, and she is on my radar, and that is thanks to Strange Darling. And why is it a demonstration, an exercise in the art of playful villainy? Well, this is a thriller. It is a, some would say a thriller, others would say a horror film. Sometimes those two genres kind of walk hand in hand anyways. And the filmmakers choose to reveal information in very curious ways, in a very curious, unorthodox manner, but never in a way where it feels like this is just an exercise. It's just an exercise in style. It's no more than experimental cinema. I never got that vibe. I got the vibe that this was an honest story with real characters, genuine characters that felt sufficiently three-dimensional. I'm not going to say these are the greatest characters in the history of cinema, but they are sufficiently three-dimensional. But the details of who they are not only inform the audience, but they inform the trajectory that the plot in the film takes. It's very creative. It's very cleverly edited. It's very cleverly acted. It was also shot, speaking of funny bits of information, famous actor Giovanni Ribisi. This is his debut, obviously not as an actor, not as a director. It is his debut as a cinematographer. Giovanni Ribisi shot this movie. How wild is that? So I've never heard of this director. An actress who I did not remember existed is now on my radar because of her performance in this movie. And Giovanni Ribisi was the cinematographer. That is a bizarre cocktail of wonderful ingredients, by the way. I was pleasantly surprised with Strange Darling. It's very playful in how it delivers its content. It's playful in how it delivers information that may or may not change the viewer's perception of what is going on. It's incredibly playful and inventive. It looks beautiful, partially because it was shot on film, partially because apparently Giovanni Ribisi is a pretty competent DOP. DOP being a director of photography, DOP. It doesn't feel like an exercise. It feels like an honest project with a story to tell. And I think that's what I appreciated most of all, that Strange Darling beautifully marries the idea of telling a story in an unorthodox way, but still making it to the finish line, and I, the viewer, leaving the theater with the impression that I did see a story and not just an exercise in style. I'm not suggesting that I am anti-exercises of style. Some of them are quite amusing. Some of them can be quite fun. But this isn't that. Even though I completely acknowledge that I may be selling it like that, but it's not. There's a real story going on here, and it's thematically rich. It's thematically layered. There's great texture to this movie. There's a glow about it. Some of the story, and I think how the film was shot as well, makes me believe that it doesn't quite take place in the real world. I mean, it kind of takes place in our everyday life, but it also kind of doesn't. At the same time, there's an ethereal quality depicted through the visuals, the lighting, the shadowing, the setting as well. It's just a little bit heightened. It's just a tiny bit heightened. Like the movie took a little bit of speed. Just took a little bit of speed, but not a lot. You're not sitting in the movie theater going, wow, this movie's going 1,000 miles per hour. This is a wild movie. No, it's still taking its time. It's still taking its time. It's not in a rush to get where it needs to go. And yet a lot happens. So that was, I guess, a review of Strange Darling. As of early September 2024, I think it's my favorite film of the year. I haven't seen a whole lot this year. I think up until this weekend, I think Steve Nichols' Bike Riders, or The Bike Riders rather, was my favorite movie. I also liked The Book of Clarence, which is way back from January. I thought that was a beautiful film. And the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which is maybe a bit more traditional fare, but I thought it was incredibly well made and incredibly well acted. Those are probably, I'd say Book of Clarence and Ungentlemanly Warfare are probably battling it out for the bronze medal at this point. I'd give silver to The Bike Riders, and gold, I'm going to go gold to Strange Darling. I'd be very impressed if something more clever and inventive than Strange Darling comes out this year. I absolutely adored it. It's a strong recommend from me. It's not for everybody. It is a thriller. It's an R-rated thriller. I need to be clear on that. If you don't like, the scenes of violence that are a little bit intense and can be a little bit graphic, maybe don't go see this one. But hey, if you love a good thriller and you want to be taken aback, you want to discover something fresh, absolutely go see Strange Darling, or wait when it becomes available on digital. I did notice that it's already on pre-order on Amazon. I'm an Amazon, not Amazon, pardon me. Apple is what I meant to say. I have an Apple TV at home, and I know in the Apple store it's already on pre-order. So it's coming down the pipeline pretty shortly. I don't know how long its lifespan in theaters is going to be. It's a very small movie. The fact that I saw it in an art house cinema is already an indication that it's a pretty small film. But I absolutely loved it. So there you have it. That was another episode 2 of Film Filter. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find me on YouTube. Just search for Edgar Chaput 1793. So that's my full name, Edgar Chaput, Chaput 1793. I'm also on X, or formerly known as Twitter, at Edgar Chaput 1983. And I'm on Facebook. It's just my name, Edgar Chaput. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you again, hopefully in the near future. Ciao, guys.